secrets of a garden hidden behind a distinguished museum's courtyard gates. And then discover a collection of cloistered gardens inspired by medieval monasteries. In Singapore, savor a dazzling display of color in the world's largest orchid garden. And on the French Riviera, explore one of the most unusual and exotic gardens in the world. Join us now for a spectacular World Garden Tour. We begin this World Garden Tour in New York City. Here, many of the city's most secluded and stunning gardens are concealed inside the courtyards of some of the city's finest museums, including the Frick Collection on fashionable Fifth Avenue. This grand mansion was one of the most magnificent private residences in New York during the early 1900s. It was the home of steel tycoon and art collector Henry Clay Frick. In his will, Frick bequeaths his residence to the community to establish a public art gallery. Since 1935, this mansion has housed the world-renowned Frick Collection, which consists of beautiful masterpieces both inside and outside in the garden, like these soft pink Queen Elizabeth roses.
I think one of the interesting things about the Frick Collection Fifth Avenue garden is that unlike a lot of the, or all of the Fifth Avenue mansions, it's offset from the street and has ample space for a garden.
This impressive iron fence surrounds this grand Fifth Avenue estate. It acts much like a veil, adding a bit of intrigue to the beautiful garden within this raised courtyard.
It's an old trick to raise gardens a few feet above the street level because it frames the image that you're viewing. It makes it like you look into a picture as opposed to something that's a part of the street. It isolates and separates it and frames the view.
Several years after the mansion opened to the public as an art museum, the garden underwent some changes that helped to enhance this beautiful estate.
A search went out to find an appropriate landscape designer, and Frederick Law Olmsted II, who's the son of the great designer of Central Park, was engaged to redesign the Fifth Avenue garden. At that time, he sloped the embankments equally on all three sides, and he placed the three magnolias that we see here.
In the late 1970s, this courtyard was added along the 70th Street side of the Frick. English landscape designer Russell Page was commissioned to design a colorful garden hideaway in this space. Like the Fifth Avenue garden, this garden is raised to eye level and protected by an impressive iron gate.
The large imposing Samuel Yellin Gate, which stands in front of the 70th Street garden, has a long history of the Frick Collection. It was the original entrance gate to the house, to the courtyard to the house, when Henry Clay Frick lived here in 1915.
During the spring, a rainbow of tulips awaits beyond the garden gate.
Winter is long here in New York, and the vibrancy of the colors we can get in tulips, and this year we used Godot-Schnick, which is an old hybrid known for its brilliance of red and yellow, all in a splash petal effect.
It's one of many masterpieces on display in the courtyard surrounding the Frick Collection, and is truly one of the most breathtaking sights in New York City. Much farther uptown, on the banks of the Hudson River, the Cloisters is another famous New York museum that conceals garden masterpieces within its courtyards.
The Cloisters is the branch museum of the Metropolitan Museum of Art that's dedicated to the art and architecture of medieval Europe. The building opened in 1938, so it's a modern structure. However, incorporated into the building are architectural elements that date from the 12th to the 16th century. So the building is a work of art in and of itself.
The Gothic architecture of the Cloisters offers a perfect backdrop for the exquisite gardens here. The museum got its name from monastery courtyards of the Middle Ages. The three gardens here are modeled after French cloisters, and the first is the formal Cuxa cloister.
The Cuxa cloister is a typical design of a cloister garth garden, an enclosed space that's open to the sky. The garden is composed of 4 raised beds, intersected by a pathway with a fountain at the center.
This hidden garden's 4 raised beds feature a hawthorn, pear, crabapple, and cornelia cherry tree, as well as a lush lawn and a beautiful planting bed. Many modern varieties of fascinating plants from the Romanesque period through the Gothic era flourish here in this flower bed.
We have lady's mantle, Alchemilla vulgaris, and it actually gets its name from the little pearl drops of water that collect on the leaves. And alchemists believed that this little pearl drop of water would make into a substance called the philosopher's stone, and philosopher's stone would then in turn convert any metal into gold or silver.
The central feature of this Cuxa cloister is this fountain. For centuries, the sound of trickling water has often been heard in the courtyards of monasteries and abbeys, offering a soothing environment for meditation. The second garden here at the museum also creates a peaceful ambiance. It's called the Bonfont Cloister and contains a diverse collection of more than 300 plants that were used for cooking and medicine, and plants like weld and woad that were used in works of art. Dyes were created from plants like these and used in medieval masterpieces, many of which are on display at the cloisters. This tapestry, called the Unicorn in Captivity, was created from plant dyes. Many of the plants depicted in the tapestry can also be found in the museum's third courtyard garden, the Tree Cloister. It's the smallest of the 3 gardens and features plants native to European woodlands and meadows, including moneywort, foxglove, and Madonna lily. This beautifully sculpted fountain also attracts some special visitors.
A fountain is at the center of the garden, and birds light on the water spigots and drink upside down. So it's another fun aspect to the garden.
It's nature's special touch, nestled amid these Gothic walls, a cloistered sanctuary full of peaceful plantings and a great sense of tranquility. When World Garden Tour continues, a colorful array of orchids awaits as we travel to the Garden Island of Singapore and the largest display of orchids in the world.
Decadent taste, 60 calories. Sugar-free Jell-O pudding cups. Wiggle. Because every diet needs a little wiggle room. Wiggle.
If you purchased or refinanced your home a couple of years ago and you got one of those adjustable teaser rates to qualify, well, you may be facing an increase that could raise your monthly payment by hundreds of dollars. What can you do? Well, just call or log on to Ditech.com and refinance to a low fixed rate. With Ditech, you can feel confident that you're being taken care of every step of the way. Call 1-800-71-FIXED or log on to Ditech.com, a GMAC company.
She uses this beautiful TimberTech deck all the time. Her family loves it. There's virtually no maintenance, no staining or sealing. All they have to do is enjoy it. But what she likes most about her TimberTech deck is
that it's my TimberTech deck.
TimberTech. Less work, more life.
Fill the bag and nobody gets hurt. Fill the bag, fill the bag. Feel it! More. Come on, I haven't got all day.
Because Glad ForceFlex bags are designed to stretch.
Come on, lady.
They may take...
Garden Tour now travels to the Southeast Asian island of Singapore. This busy metropolitan city is known for its imaginative pastoral landscaping, which gently borders the panorama of concrete, steel, and glass skyscrapers. Beautiful gardens and leisure parks provide a verdant urban retreat throughout the city, including one magnificent floral enclave, Singapore's National Orchid Garden. Nestled inside Singapore's Botanic Gardens, this tropical paradise has become a world-renowned center for orchid conservation and research. Here, visitors can explore the world's largest collection of tropical and subtropical orchids.
The National Orchid Garden is a new, expanded component of the Botanic Garden. It was the most popular part of the garden. The people who only had a short time in the Botanic Garden always zeroed in on the orchids.
Orchids are very colorful and also it's very long-lasting. So as it is long-lasting, well, it becomes a revenue. We can grow orchids for the cut flower industry. We can export them to all over the world. So it becomes a source of revenue for our country.
This captivating garden is also home to the world's largest collection of Asian orchids. Within this glorious garden, visitors can get close enough to enjoy the intimacy of each orchid's delicate detail, like this ruffled beauty called Vanda. Orchidaceae, the scientific name for orchids, is the largest family of flowering plants in the world. It's estimated that there are over 30,000 species of orchids and more than 60,000 hybrids. That means 1 out of every 10 varieties of flowering plants in the world is an orchid.
What makes an orchid is one that has 6 parts. It has 1, 2, 3 sepals and 1, 2, 3 petals. And the petal, this petal is a modified petal that is kind of the landing pad for the insects to crawl in there.
Orchids come in a staggering variety of form, size, and color. And at Singapore's National Orchid Garden, visitors are sure to discover some new and exotic beauties. There are 2 distinct groups of orchids. Monophotile orchids have a single stem, which produces new leaves at the growing tip, and roots which grow on the lower part of the stem. The Vanda Miss Chow Kim, Singapore's national flower, is a beautiful example of a monophotile orchid. The other distinct category is symphotial orchids. They have several stems, which can store food and water in pseudobulbs or storage organs. Despite these differences, orchids remain one of the most colorful and prolific flowers in the plant kingdom. Within Singapore's remarkable orchid garden, there are tranquil venues such as its tropical waterfall. It provides a soothing backdrop for the garden's fabulous display of orchids. And there are so many magical orchids to discover. Dusty pink Miltonia splashed with red, Phalaenopsis, the moth orchid, and Cattleya hybrids. It's a bountiful paradise where amid the sprawling orchid displays, a single flower can be as arresting as the entire garden.
Like I say, there's so many different varieties of orchids that one man can't appreciate all, so you collect as many as you can. Once you get one, you want more, and before you know, you have a large collection.
It's very relaxed to stroll along the orchid garden, and on top of that, people will get to see colorful displays of orchids, and they can come here to study about orchids in the orchidarium.
Singapore's National Orchid Garden is a great place to explore and discover the many beautiful varieties of orchids, and it's truly one of the most memorable public gardens in the world. When World Garden Tour returns, we'll travel to Monte Carlo, where masses of brilliantly blooming succulents put on an outstanding year-round show. The next stop on World Garden Tour is the beautiful French Riviera, where a unique and awe-inspiring garden thrives high on a cliff overlooking the casinos of Monte Carlo. It's called the Jardin Exotique, and it's filled with a remarkable collection of succulent plants. This unusual garden was originally commissioned by England's Prince Albert in the early 1900s. The prince had become enamored with these strange exotic plants when he noticed them growing in the garden of one of Monaco's residents. Soon afterwards, Albert hired a talented engineer, Louis Notary, to create a public garden of exotic succulents. The only question was where to put it.
Why did they choose this place? Well, one of the reasons is that the place was more or less free, you know, so then because there were some succulent plants that were already growing there, they thought, well, if those plants are growing there naturally, that's the place where we have to build the garden for those kind of plants.
Monsieur Notary was a brilliant engineer who constructed a series of bridges into the steep hillside setting. He made it possible for visitors to easily traverse the rugged terrain while enjoying an intimate view of each intriguing plant in the garden.
This place has a very good orientation. I mean, from the beginning of the day to the late afternoon, we have full sun, as you can see, and we have rock. Rock is very important because during the hot time of the day, the rock keeps the warm, and during the night, the rock gives back the warm to the plants. So there is never very, very low temperature there. There is more or less no frost, and we also are sheltered from the strong winds from east or from west.
In the Jardin Exotique, all kinds of succulents abound. Those that retain moisture in their thick stems are the cacti. These slow-growing plants come in many shapes and sizes. They're all distinguished by cushion-like structures on their stems, called areoles, from which flowers and prickly spines grow. Other types of succulents retain moisture in their leaves, like aloe, sedum, and sempervivum, which is commonly called hens and chicks. These leafy plants are fairly hardy and, like cacti, can absorb moisture from dew and mists, as well as from the soil. In the Jardin Exotique, stately, mature specimens of all varieties flower freely within this Mediterranean climate, which has year-round sunshine. Nearly every month of the year, something is in bloom.
We have full blossoming from November to October, you know, with especially very bright flowers in December, January and February. One of the time I prefer there in the garden is winter. I mean December and January, because it's never cold in this part of France and it's not hot. And at this time, it's a very quiet time, not too much people in the garden, and you have very, very nice flowering with the African plants, and especially the aloes with very bright colors, red, yellow, orange, some pink also, and well, with big masses of flowers, you know, very nice colors here in the garden.
Aside from all the color, sculptural shapes and interesting textures also await those who venture into this amazing garden. And there are plants from nearly every continent of the world represented here. There are spiny, hardy cacti from Western North America, Central America, and South America. There are also wonderful exotic varieties of flowering succulents from Africa, Asia, and India. Visitors will discover some of the most interesting and unusual vegetation in the world here at the Jardin Exotique. When World Garden Tour returns, we'll discover how athletic gardeners meet the challenge of caring for the plants in the Jardin Exotique, and we'll show you some easy ways of caring for succulents in your own garden. As World Garden Tour continues at the Jardin Exotique, high atop the cliffs of Monaco, we find surprises at every turn. In fact, you may even encounter a gardener rappelling down the rocks.
The maintenance of the garden is something quite unusual for people knowing garden job, you know, because we don't follow the usual rules of gardening. You need to have a courageous gardener that don't hesitate to climb and to hang on ropes to make some jobs, I mean, for cleaning and things like that.
Cleaning the cacti and other succulents is a challenging task for the talented gardeners at the Jardin Exotique. It takes strength and daring, in addition to gardening skills, to care for a vertical garden like this. But you don't need to be a cliff climber to have a succulent garden at home. In fact, growing succulents can be easier than growing a lawn. In warm regions, choose a sandy, rocky site, because the biggest danger to these plants is overwatering. Rocky soil allows water to drain more easily. Taller specimens can be anchored to protect them from the high winds. A piece of soft rubber hosing or tubing works well. There are even a few cacti which are suitable for growing in cool climates. For example, the hardy prickly pear cactus is native to the arid hillsides of the Great Plains. Considered hardy in many parts of the United States, the shrubby, flat-leafed cactus is useful as a ground cover for rocky slopes. It flowers in the spring and produces edible fruit called cactus pears, which are often used in Southwest and Mexican cuisines. There are literally hundreds of varieties of succulents that can add interest to any garden. Walking through this extraordinary garden is almost a surreal experience. The Jardin Exotique is truly a colorful and sculptural place in the sun. From the French Riviera's most unusual garden showcase to Singapore's botanical garden of wondrous orchids to two of New York City's hidden garden gems. We thank you for traveling with us and hope you'll join us again next time on World Garden Tour. Formed into British Columbia's premier garden showcase. Explore the exquisitely landscaped gardens of luxury hotels in Hawaii, Singapore, and Bali. And visit a lush tropical rainforest in Australia, where exotic fruits, flowers, and spices from around the world are nurtured and grown. Join us now for a spectacular World Garden Tour. World Garden Tour begins on British Columbia's Vancouver Island at the extraordinary Butchart Gardens. This world-renowned garden is perhaps best known for its overflowing flower beds, where mass plantings of chrysanthemums and begonias, marigolds, and dusty miller provide a sea of breathtaking beauty. And the history of the gardens is perhaps as colorful as the flowers. Jenny Butchart knew nothing about gardening when she and her husband Robert first moved to Vancouver in 1904. When she planted her first rose, little did she know she had just begun one of the world's great show gardens.
One of the first parts of the garden to be developed, of course, was the Japanese garden. And from that point, her fame started spreading. People were amazed by what this woman was doing on her property. It was an incredible, really, land reclamation project.
The Japanese garden welcomes visitors with its red-lacquered torii gate and the soothing sound of a stream that meanders through the garden. An arched wooden bridge leads to a cobblestone path lined with ferns, conifer shrubs, and Japanese maples. This green backdrop is punctuated with colorful surprises, such as these pink delphiniums. Many of the large evergreens in the garden are meticulously pruned to look like clouds. Beneath the trees, bright-berried Aura metallicum, a woodland plant, adds an additional splash of color. Jenny Butchard's most ambitious project was to beautify a quarry site on the 130-acre estate. Massive amounts of topsoil were brought into the sunken garden to form landscape beds on the quarry floor.
The whole place was barren. The bottom of the quarry was littered with rock and debris. It was ugly. It was basically a moonscape. And someone, I think, challenged Jenny Butchart at one time and said even Jenny couldn't make anything grow down there. And I think that was the impetus for her to create the outstanding garden that it is.
Jenny would prove them wrong. The sunken garden leads visitors first through a green tapestry of textures, composed of dwarf junipers and other evergreen shrubs, and then onto a profusion of flowers which fill the island beds. Stunning displays of waxleaf and tuberous begonias, marigolds, and daisies from vibrant garden combinations. At the bottom of the quarry, lovely red pelargonium geraniums stand by the spring-fed waters of the sunken garden lake. At the south end of the garden, a magnificent fountain puts on a show of choreographed dancing waters. Across from the sunken garden is the rose garden. Here, bush roses, standards, and climbers create a curving bank of color. Each year, new prize-winning roses are added to the fragrant display. Vivid combinations of roses and delphiniums create a chorus of pink, blue, and purple. And in late summer, the leaves of the old-fashioned climbing roses form a green garland around the walkway trellises. Following this path leads visitors to another garden masterpiece, the Italian garden. Tall cannas and thousands of wax begonias show off their profuse blooms in symmetrical flower beds. The formal pool is shaped like a star and is surrounded by a clipped box hedge. The nearby ivy-covered building has window boxes overflowing with white, red, and purple schizanthus. From these windows, guests can admire the graceful water lilies floating on the surface of the formal Italian pool. Jenny Butchart was famous for her flowers and for pleasing her guests. Today, visitors continue to enjoy her gracious traditions.
One of the things that Jenny Butchart had said, and which we try to do every day, is not have a static creation, but have the garden continually in motion. So we'll change the plantings regularly, we change the colors, the displays. It's always active. There's nothing that just sits and people will never come back and say, you know, it was exactly the same.
We'll take a look at Butchart Garden's fabulous dahlia displays later in the show. But when World Garden Tour now travels to exotic Hawaii, Bali, and Singapore for a special look at luxury hotel gardens. In Southeast Asia's thriving city of Singapore, land is at a premium, and the idea of spacious private gardens within the city limits is an unlikely concept. Most people live in high-rise apartments, and even houses, which cost millions of dollars, have little space for gardens. It's no wonder that many of Singapore's best gardens are planted on the grounds of hotels. Far removed from downtown Singapore, one hotel has expansive grounds. The Beaufort Hotel sits on the nature reserve Sentosa Island. Here, on 27 acres of tropical woodlands, visitors can enjoy a tranquility hard to find in the city of Singapore. Breezy open corridors complement the natural environment and provide a pleasant promenade past the enchanting water gardens. And wide pools of water lilies enhance the serene retreat. Fountains dance within the ponds, which separate these buildings, which are inspired by Asian palaces. Surrounding the water gardens are many century-old trees, including huge Alstonia kipok and ribbed sea apple. There are also thousands of awe-inspiring aquatic plants and flowers, including giant Victoria lilies and multicolored lotuses. These delicate, beautiful plants are often difficult to cultivate in man-made ponds, yet they thrive on rainwater alone in these magical water gardens in Singapore. On the tropical island of Bali, another lush natural environment offers visitors a hotel garden getaway experience.
In a way, the great private gardens of Bali are in hotels, and whereas in America you have the Rockefellers and the Deere fortune and the great industrial families sponsoring these brilliant gardens. In Asia, it's the Hyatt and the Four Seasons and various corporations that are building these brilliant gardens.
The landscaping at the Four Seasons is like a tropical village. 350 pavilions display cascading ferns along the high patios. The view embraces palm terrace gardens and spectacular Balinese water vistas. Carved planters filled with yellow fronds welcome visitors. Inside, smooth teak floors open to wonderful sunken pools of aquatic greenery. Bali's cultural influence comes from China and India, and it's reflected in the beautiful Balinese sculptures found throughout this exotic garden.
It does have that lovely thing of the villages, of the Chinese walled villages, and very dressed courtyard corner views of beautiful statuary and stairways and pots and water gardens, and it's a very rich garden, a very rich palette.
Visitors can spend a leisurely afternoon contemplating the formal water garden. Large urns bursting with healthy ferns are set amid bulrush plants and palms, while pink Balinese frangipani grace the water's edge. There are many romantic pathways throughout the garden that lead guests past tall palms to wide beach vistas. And one of the favorite features of this garden is that it always seems private. There is a myriad of hidden respites where visitors can lounge in tropical splendor beside secluded bulrushes and palms.
There's lots of things to discover. That intrigues people, the sense of mystery and romance. And it's a very rambling, poetic garden.
Spectacular hotel gardens can offer day visitors as well as guests a romantic escape from the ordinary. On Hawaii's island of Kauai, the grounds of the Hyatt Regency Hotel present spectacular varieties of unusual tropical plants and flowers, such as gingers, colorful hibiscus, and frangipani. Dapple Japanese koi enjoy the gardens from the cool waters of the reflecting pools. And guests can enjoy the gardens from a winding man-made river that runs through it. There are surprises around every turn. Open to the balmy breezes of the Pacific Ocean, the hotel's main atrium is an exotic plant lover's dream. Here visitors will find dazzling displays of bromeliads with colorful flower stalks, as well as other unusual plants from around the world. The shrimp plant, or Costus ginger, is a native Hawaiian flower that is a garden favorite. It enjoys part shade. The bromeliads also do well shaded by the trees. In fact, some actually grow in the trees. On the island of Maui, the Kapalua Bay Hotel boasts an enormous 18-acre garden. On these exquisitely manicured grounds, visitors will find more than a dozen different kinds of palm trees, including queen palms and sago palms, and over 150 varieties of plants and flowers. Delicate pink hibiscus catch the morning dew, while graceful birds of paradise show off their orange botanical plumage. One special feature of the garden is the vast and vibrant collection of coleus, an evergreen perennial. For years, coleus could only be grown in the shade. Now these exciting new varieties can be grown anywhere in the garden. Whether planning a garden filled with tropicals or just a visit to a tropical oasis, the hotel gardens of Hawaii, Bali, and Singapore provide a wonderful source of inspiration and relaxation. When World Garden Tour returns, we'll see how an endangered tropical rainforest in Australia has become a source for exotic fruits and flowers. World Garden Tour continues now in the tropical region of North Queensland, Australia. At one time, this beautiful rainforest was burned, so sugarcane could be planted here. For several years, it was also used as a cattle ranch. However, today it has become a refuge for rare and endangered plants, thanks to American botanist Alan Carl, who with his wife Susie created a diverse tropical farm called the Botanical Ark.
We actually purchased the property 15 years ago, and when we did, it was a fairly neglected, rundown cattle property without a tree on it.
Once there, they decided to grow ethnobotanic plants, or plants that are useful to humans. These include plants used in foods, medicines, fibers, dyes, cosmetics, building materials, and religious rituals. The Carls started this creation modestly by building a home and then planting their garden around it.
We decided where the house would go by looking at a number of resources. One, we wanted to be near water. We have a creek right behind the house, which actually flows on two sides. We constructed the ponds and the water gardens in front of the house. That was important to us because water is the real key element in life. In fact, our whole life revolves around our interaction with our garden. And so the garden and the house sort of flow into each other. And I guess it, the garden is an extension of the house is an extension of the garden.
The garden began with fruit trees and herbs planted near the house. While kitchen gardens are popular throughout the world, this one has a tropical twist.
It's wonderful to have a farm in the tropics. We're growing so many different types of fruits, and we use them every day.
Visitors to the Botanical Ark are in for a treat. They can sample an unusual and flavorful palette of exotic fruits and nuts, like the creamy, sweet, lemony taste of the Rollinia, which is also called custard apple for its pudding-like texture. Another offering of the Botanical Ark is the mame sapote, native to Cuba and Mexico. This rich, sweet brown fruit is moist and sweet and tastes like pumpkin pie. One of the Carl's mainstay fruits is the rambutan. The brilliant red cluster of fruit are as tasty as they are pretty. The rambutan is called the hairy lychee. And covered in menacing spikes, the durian is a rich custardy fruit that's highly prized in Asia for its delicious bittersweet flavor. When the Carls restored the rainforest, they began sharing their bounty and their commitment to the preservation of the world's ecosystems. Yet importing exotic fruits like the durian proved to be a challenge.
It was very difficult to get them in the country for people to send them to us, so we actually went on overseas trips to collect them ourselves.
While the Botanical Ark may look like a mixed salad of plants, it's actually carefully organized into different geographic regions. Designated sections of the plantation represent rainforests from areas around the world, such as Southeast Asia, Africa, South America, or the Pacific. One of the most exotic flowers found in the garden comes from South America.
We grow Heliconia psittacorums primarily for their beautiful flowers. And of course, we initially started to grow them just for ourselves, but they took off and became a commercial crop.
Another favorite flower in the garden is the Zinger spectabila, the beehive ginger. This sturdy cone-like flower from Southeast Asia has many different varieties. It makes a tremendous cut flower that lasts 3 or 4 weeks. Heliconias and gingers both make great landscape plants in areas where there is no danger of frost, and they are also wonderful cut flowers. Many plants in the garden are the source for medicines, dyes, and spices. The curcumis is best known for the spice turmeric.
Turmeric is a yellow dyeing which they use in making rice yellow and making curry powder yellow and orange. When Buddhist monks can't get enough of it for enough saffron to dye their robes. They often use turmeric. So it's a very important plant. It's used a lot medicinally, especially for stomach disorders. And of course, many of these things are now starting to be looked at by Western medicine. But we grow some for the medicinal value, some for the landscape value, and some for the cut flower value.
The Carls remain focused on nurturing the rainforest species that they've collected from around the world. The garden that was originally planted for their own survival has achieved a new and greater importance.
We're driven by a passion for plants, a passion for people, for humanity to survive, for rainforests to survive. The spirit of the plants actually comes through stronger than anything else. They give us the drive and the encouragement to wake up each day and carry on with what we're doing.
When we return, we'll revisit Butchart Gardens in Vancouver, British Columbia, for a look at some dazzling dahlias and valuable ideas on soil preparation for your garden. World Garden Tour now returns to Butchart Gardens in Vancouver, British Columbia, and a dazzling display of dahlias. In summer, this quiet corner of the sunken garden is alive with excited visitors and an exuberant display of colorful dahlias. There are showy cactus dahlias with large floral spikes and ruffled laciniated dahlias with tightly fluted petals. Every dahlia in the garden is a showpiece, and that keeps the gardeners here very busy.
Any spent bloom in the gardens is dealt with. We're constantly cleaning up our plants whenever any bloom goes over. It's a lot of tedious work, this fine-tuning the garden, as we call it. And really, I think that is what sets us apart from a lot of gardens.
Yet when it comes down to the basics, like the quality of the soil, the methods used here will work well for many gardeners.
Every plant has different requirements, and it's important for you to know what you're planting in your garden and what nutrients really that plant is demanding from your soil. So here we'll go to a pretty intense soil monitoring program where, say for example, the rose gardens, we monitor the soil, have testing done twice a year just to make sure we have the right pH. That's the alkalinity or acidity tested. The right nutrients are available for the plant, and we will modify our fertilizer program as needed.
Good soil drainage is another important ingredient in maintaining healthy plants.
A lot of people have boggy soil, heavy soil that doesn't drain. Again, that leaves nowhere for the roots of the plants to go, and they really need to have a light soil.
So whether you're creating your own garden showplace or planting your first flower, following Butchart's good advice on soil preparation, it will help ensure healthy, beautiful plants in your garden paradise. From Vancouver's premier show garden, to the exotic splendor of tropical hotel gardens, to Queensland, Australia's bountiful rainforest, we thank you for traveling with us, and we hope you'll join us again next time on World Garden Tour.